Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Creative Redundancy back again. The one known as CR, like it says on the screen right now. And clearly, be prepared. First and foremost. Hopefully, everyone's doing well. Good morning, everyone. And shout out to the replay gang who's checking this out later. We'll see how long I go for. We'll see. So hopefully everyone's doing well, like I said. And this stream is the cozy, warm stream with CR. A little chit-chat about warm things. The upcoming season and all that stuff. Hey! What's up, Blake? We got a hedgehog family in the house. How's it going, Laura? First and foremost, coffee. I'm assuming you guys can hear me because no one's complaining yet. Hopefully everyone can hear. How's it going, Sunflower? Did you guys notice how I put this thumbnail? That's a real image, by the way. That's not AI generated or anything like that. I actually took that picture last year at this time. An actual sunflower with snow behind it. I know I'm actually going to use the word. I'm actually going to say the word. But yeah, that's actually... that's actually one of the container gardening type of... Well, you saw it in the container gardening video, but what you didn't notice is that I took a picture of it later. With some white stuff behind it. Ah! You got some coffee too? Nice. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Crisp. Sorry. We all know how we just went by. So yeah. You know, straight up warm coffee, right? Warm coffee. Warm coffee on a nice, cool, cold day. When it's kind of chilly out. You know, it's nice. You know, keep your hands warm, keep you warm on the inside when it's kind of chilly out. And yes, I've already seen below freezing, by the way. I've already seen the white stuff, too, already. Although it did not linger. However, I do realize in time, the temperature will drop. It's just eventuality. But hopefully not for long, and hopefully not that soon. But in the meantime, I need to get prepared, and we need to get prepared for it, right? Those things can change, right? The seasons are changing and all that stuff, so. You're not surprised, Laura? Yeah. You know, and this is why I'm doing this stream. Because it's, well, ending the first week of November. And the season is changing. The daytime temperatures are getting lower. And for some of us, it's still warm during the day, but it might be colder out at night, you know, after sunset. We're reaching, you know, less daylight hours. So, you know, eventually the temperature does drop to a degree in comparison to like summer and fall, you know. Relatively speaking, you know, it depends where you are. And of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere right now, well, this can apply like 6 months from now. So keep that in mind. So I know everyone's getting that coffee. I could tell everyone's getting that coffee. But yeah, you know, coffee is one of those things, like I said. Or tea. Or hot brew, right? There's something about that. The morale, the comfort of it, right? You know, warm coffee. You know, it's a routine thing in the morning. Come on, I got my coffee this morning. I bet most of my viewers probably have some sort of warm beverage with them right now. They're sipping on it in this nice, cozy environment. with my nice virtual fire. Because it'd still be a virtual fire even if I showed you a real one, because it's not in front of you. You guys can't feel the radiant heat. But, you know, let's see. Oh, it's still warm for you guys for a bit. Dang. Well, for the rest of us, at times we gotta either harvest them or bring them inside and do something about it. This coffee's hitting the spot today. I don't know why. I didn't change it. It just... Oh, I know why. Because I'm doing a live stream with it, and, you know, I got people joining me. You know. So I got company. I guess. That must be the reason. So, as a heads up here, for some of the content I'm doing for this upcoming winter, there will be videos related to it. I don't know if I'll see how much I wanna, what's it called? Spoilers I might give. Although I don't really want to spoil that video. But I am working, there is at least 2 I have in mind. There's one for absolutely for sure, because I already started the process of it. With a prototype, right? Cause, let's remember everyone. To say hi to Iron Farmhouse. I see you in there. Yeah, I see you in there. To remember is that it's warm in places, but it can get cold in places too. You know, if you're closer to the equator, maybe this is less applicable, but for anyone that's further away from the equator, right? So within, let's see, that latitude, what, the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, right? If you're in the Southern Hemisphere and stuff, right? Around there, you know, or for me, it'd just be the rest of Canada. It can get cold. What? Norway. There's probably other places too. Probably Sweden too, right? And other places that, Siberia, right? It gets cold. So you gotta be ready for it. You know, especially if you're new to the area, right? Maybe it's your first season, first winter here in Canada, for example, or whatever, that gets cold. Or you're in a new place, you know, you've been in the valley of somewhere, and now you're higher in the mountain area or whatever, right? You might see that stuff in time. It's just an eventuality. So, you know, you want to be ready for it as much as you can, right? Which starts from being prepared starting today and being proactive about it. Getting that stuff, specifically the clothing aspect of it, which would cover the shelter element of it. Yeah, see what I did there? Those are, well, pretty much your clothing is going to be your first line of defense. You know, I know for some of you it's a little warm still, and don't get me wrong, it's actually above freezing right now here, so technically, you know, but do consider it, right? You know, make some plans for it. Kind of be like, okay, maybe next week I'll start bringing out that one jacket. You know, the evenings, that early evening was kind of cool. I know it's getting warmer out again, but that might not last that long, or just linger around for a couple days. Then it returns back to seasonal or below seasonal values. And let's remember, it is supposedly, we're entering a La Nina season, right? So balance or lower in temperature. So you might see that, you know, wet stuff or the white stuff or a combination of it and stuff like that. Or have to deal with the freezing fall cycle, right? Maybe you are getting rain, right? But, the temperatures don't fall, and you get that kind of freeze and fall cycle. Because the temperature starts to fall below freezing during at night, then returns back to above freezing during the day. So you get that freeze and fall cycle, especially if you got the white stuff on the ground already. You get that freeze and fall cycle. Ugh. And, you just gotta deal with it, especially if you're going around. I know people are going around shopping or whatever. Gotta keep that in mind, especially probably next month more for most people, January for people. And keep that in mind. I see. Well, lucky you. We can have 4 seasons in one day. It almost seems like it at times. It doesn't have iron fires. It almost seems like it's like that. You have all your coats and footwear stored under the okay. Yeah, you're keeping up what you're using, right? But you realize that just maybe bring it back to the easier access again, or you kind of have it in your incoming rotation of stuff that you rotate in, like specifically the clothing aspect. So maybe you have it if you have a back door or something like that, or it's like, okay, let's put that jacket over there. Just case, right? Just case, and something you could just grab, in the evening, just case if it feels cooler out. You're doing something outside still, like you still have time, so go grab something. Sometimes the wind picks up, so you need a windbreaker, and stuff like that. Yeah, I get that, Iron Force. Yeah, because they're on the road. All right, and stuff like that. Because let's remember this transitional period, or if you haven't gone through the transitional period, of the kind of weather, I should say weather, but temperature change specifically, now's the time to start. If you haven't already, at least consider it, or at least plan it in advance. Maybe not this week because it's still warm for some of you because it's 60. But, when it gets closer to that, single digits in Celsius or that 40 Fahrenheit range and lower, because, windshield is technically not a factor when it's above freezing, but the wind can cool you down. And of course, wind does blow the heat right off of you, literally, right? That's why you get that saying, that biting aspect of like windshield, right? There's a point, there's a reasoning why they say it like that, or chill, cold or chill to the bone, right? Well, because pretty much it's blowing the heat right off you. Because obviously we're warm-bodied individuals, right? Obviously, so we're always radiating heat out all the time. Some of us a little bit more, some of us a little bit less. Some of us, we can get cold feet. Some of us, our hands are always warm, but some of us, our hands get cold. For some of us, other parts of the body get cold faster, such as the extremities, right? Feet, head, hands, arms. Where's my favorite place to stay warm? Right here with you folks. That was corny, I know. No. Actually, maybe a coffee place. Nice warm coffee place with coffee. If we're talking about an urban environment. But, outside in nature, maybe, in the sunlight, right? Because gotta remember that too, right? There may be less daylight sunlight hours, but generally speaking, it is generally warmer in the sun, generally speaking. Even though you might not notice it so much when it's like minus 22 Fahrenheit, minus 30 Celsius, but saying, with that said, you do notice it to a certain degree. You just notice it less. And if you're wearing darker clothing, that can allow more absorption of the thermal energy from the sun, for example. In the same way that you feel that the heat wave from a campfire or something like a heat source, like some sort of propane heater, stuff like that, that would radiate, well, yeah, pretty much radiate heat out. And you feel that, all right? And that's why it's just like, that standard. It's just like putting your hands out. It's just like rubbing your hands. It's like, right? You see that all the time. I mean, it's almost like, right? That's like a meme or something like that. You can just like picture that. If you had to think of like a 2-second clip, it's like rubbing hands and putting your hands out. It's like, you know. Feeling warm and warming up your hands, right? There's something about that. It's just like holding your coffee and it feels warm in the hands, nice and cozy, The caffeine itself is waking you up. Maybe it's tea, hot chocolate, right? That's all good. I have tea and hot chocolate too. Not as much, but, I still have it every so often. Let's see here. You have worn a winter coat in the summer at night while camping when it got cold and windy. So was it glad you had it? Yeah, something like that, right? I get, sometimes the temperature in some places at night can drop more than compared to other places. I guess a desert environment is one of those examples, especially in comparison to the daytime temperature, right? It can feel cold. It's like the difference from going like 40 some Celsius to like 10 Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit all the way down to 50 Fahrenheit. And you've been out during the day, and let's say you're camping out or something like that, yeah, you probably want to bring something because the difference in temperature, it's going to take a bit for you. It's going to be very hard to climatize to that or to adapt to that because the difference is always the difference is there, and it's relatively speaking quick, so it's hard to adapt to that. So of course most of us are gonna have to bring something or at least have a plan to make something to keep warm with, just to cut the edge off, as they say. Yeah. Maybe sunflower. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Firehorse. Yeah, and stuff like that. And I will mention, food randomly because technically food, to drive that engine of radiating heat out, this thermal energy that we all have, right? Anyone seen video footage and all that stuff, pictures of like thermal cameras, right? We're always radiating heat out, from the skin and all that stuff. It's just because technically heat rises, and because of gravity, we're always radiating it right out, right? And due to buoyancy, it just keeps lifting, right? So we're always radiating heat out all the time. A little bit less at times, maybe a little bit more at times, right? And to fuel that, we need food. Alright? You need food to to generate that metabolic heat and stuff like that. And besides, if you're shivering or whatever, that uses up the energy that you have, right? So you get to fuel the body too, right? Now, obviously, clothing, shelter components, cover components, they hold back the heat. So it takes longer for that heat to radiate away from our body because we have layers of protection, right? And metaphorically speaking, it's almost like a suit of armor, right? It blocks this wind. It holds back the heat, so it's closer to your body, so you feel warmer. So it's not radiating out to the environment and just leaking out, right? Because obviously, heat is a transfer from somewhere hot to somewhere cold, so it's always one direction. So you're trying to slow that down as much as possible, right? Because due to things like conduction, convection, radiated heat loss, right? Although, while we're outside, at home or whatever, two primary things of heat loss are to be the conduction and the convection. So you're directly touching the ground, for example, right? Directly touching snow, making the snowball. And convection, the wind itself, right? For the same reason in the summer, the water and wind can cool you down, will cause you to get, and that causes you to cool down. In that same way, will cause you in the winter when it's cooler out, fall, early spring, the winter time, if it's applicable. That's going to draw the heat away from you, and you're going to feel a little bit chilly, right? So you gotta keep your clothes as dry as possible. Try not to sweat in them, right? Especially if it's cold, right? You got your base layer, some sort of insulative type of layer, and maybe an outer shell or something more wind, water resistant, waterproof, windproof, stuff like that. That's absolutely, yes. The longer, yeah, and that's another thing, right? These outdoor activities that people do. This is why you see, like, look at people that go skiing, right? Like, granted, sometimes it could be a very nice day, right? But there's a certain degree that, it's a nice day, sunny day. Okay, it won't feel overly too bad, right? However, with that said, if you're going fast in skis, tobogganing, sledding, well, what happens when you go move forward in an environment, right? You're moving the air, right? And you're going so fast with skis and tobogganing to a certain degree, depending how high the hill is and all this stuff. There's going to be, well, I guess an artificial windshield. Because it could be calm out, and yeah, you feel that because you're going downhill, right? So you don't feel the air, the resistance of the air, right? So, hence they still wear stuff. So, they might be on one side on the skiing down on the south-facing side. Oh yeah, it's not so bad, right? In the sun, but they decide to go on another trail that's facing on the north-facing side with in the shade. They're like, they might need that because they're out of the sun, so they're not getting that solar energy hitting them, and they're in the shade, and there's still quote unquote a breeze going by them. So they want that layers of protection to help them out, right? They could, and again, layers, right? So if they were in the sun, they could open up their jacket a little bit more, let some heat out, right? But because they have those layers in the first place, they're back on the north-facing side, going down that hill. They can bundle back up again because they have these layers with them, right? Because you can always layer down. You can't layer up if you don't got the cover or shelter components with you in the first place. like literally on you, if not in a backpack. Yeah, well, that too. There's a reason why they have that. Right. And you're right about that, Iron Forest. When you're outside for longer periods of time, right? And that you actually, and if you're cold for longer periods of time, because the longer you've been cold for, the longer it takes to warm back up. Because literally your core body temperature has dropped to a certain degree, whatever, 35, maybe on more extreme case of that, right? But that kind of cold to the chill to the bone kind of deal, right? Because it takes longer to warm back up and get back to quote unquote a normal state. Like maybe how you feel right now if you're inside or whatever, right? Maybe you're nice and cozy, right? You know, remember that. When you feel that there's a difference, you and I there is one reason why I know this, because this one time back in, what was that, 2018, probably 2018, when I did this a challenge of the extreme cold challenge. Can't believe I actually did that. I swear, now that I think about it, it feels like I'm getting chilly just thinking about it right now. But, I stuck my hands in ice cold water well below freezing. Now, I did that kind of out the wind, but I did do this while it was actually winter. And this is like minus 20, minus 11 Fahrenheit, right? Couple minutes, right? Because I was doing it as a challenge in a relatively safe environment with, I didn't, randomly just go in the middle of the woods and just do it, right? Just because I wanted to get a sense of this, that's actually why I did it, right? And, try out sparking up some interest and sparking up something else, right? In terms of a fire start. But, in that video, I showed doing it, right? And I've said this before, one of the things I didn't really say in that video was that, yeah, you could see I was warming up my hand and back again after those 2-3 minutes, give or take. Pretty much extreme cold, if you think about it, because the hands are in water and it's below freezing. So then heat is just sucking right out of me through that, right? Through the conduction of the water, right? The convection of the water pulling heat away and stuff like that. And then ultimately going into the environment, right? To the air and all that stuff. One of the things I didn't really mention in that video, like I said, was that when I came back inside, it took me another hour to, get back into, more or less into a normal state. Where my hands felt comfortable again, kind of, typical. Maybe right after getting out of a warm shower or out of bed. That kind of normal, where your hands are just you get the most dexterity and all that stuff. You can do stuff, right? So it's one of those things I keep in mind now and just yes, I've seen this a couple times now. I'm just even when I was growing up too, I was just the colder you've been, the longer it takes to warm back up. Because you gotta raise your body temperature back up. So it takes energy, a little bit of time. Sometimes it felt like forever at times, but in time you can warm back up. Oh yeah, it can be a painful experience. Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, Iron Fire Horse, right? I mean, putting your hands underneath your armpit. I've had to do that before. Even with other people's armpits. It's just because underneath your armpits, because it's so close to your core, and honestly, it's that joining spot to your arm, right? It's one of the spots that has a lot of heat. So I've done that before with fingertips and stuff like that. Because I got frost nip on my fingertips, or my hands are a little bit colder than I realized, And I don't want to rub my hands, especially avoid rubbing your hands in the cold and rubbing your skin there like I'm kind of doing right here. Because it's one thing you're doing that very, very temporary. Very, very temporary, right? And you're relatively, you can go into a warmer environment, you're just kind of buying that extra minute, or whatever. And that's one thing if you got gloves on. But try to avoid doing that when you don't have gloves on and with bare hands, because what starts to happen is, yes, friction generates heat. However, friction on the skin, what starts to happen, you usually get that on your feet when you're walking, for example, right? You may start getting blisters, and that's probably not the way to do it, right? So the better idea is put your hands underneath your armpit and warm them up, right? I mean, like I said, I've done this before. I mean, it does help and stuff like that. What's up, James? I see you. Hey, I didn't mention the other part, Iron Fibers. Just because it's got silver in it doesn't always mean I'm gonna mention it. Just saying, just saying, just saying. Oh wow, Iron Fibers. I didn't realize. Yeah, I guess you've definitely seen that kind of pain. Dang. You've definitely seen that kind of pain. Let's just say I haven't gone through that kind of not quite. Maybe I'll be glad. Knock on wood a little that I haven't. Wait, where's this wood? Oh yeah. Yeah, there we go. Knock on wood on that. Whew. I feel like I gotta go get a sweater on. No, I'm just kidding. But you know, that also reminds me of something too, right? If possible, you know, wool sweaters, for example, you know. And if you can't, or have access to it or whatever, you know, maybe acrylic synthetic, but, you know, wool sweater, for example. I'm not wearing a wool sweater right now, I'm just actually wearing more like a turtleneck right now. Yeah, I am wearing a turtleneck. Although I usually wear hoodies, but every so often I will put on a sweater just because, depending on the activities that I'm doing, and kind of planning that in advance. I mean, if you're planning to go skiing, for example, I'll use that as a analogy to go down the hill on. Because usually if you're doing something like that, or tobogganing, or skating outside, like an outdoor skating rink, you know, within time, you know, you're gonna be outside enjoying, you're gonna be outside for a bit, you know, a couple hours, right? So, you know, I know my parents always said, they're like, how, where are you going? I'm going out tobogganing or whatever, right? They're like, how long are you going for? I'm like, a couple hours. I'm like, and they're like, where's something warm? If you're gonna be out there that long. I'm like, okay, I get it. And I'm like, yeah. But it's true though, right? You know, it's one, like Iron Fire said, it's one thing to go from a warm place, like a home, venture outside to get to your warm, heat started with a heater, vehicle, car, van, truck, whatever, and then exit the vehicle into a cold environment, then walk for a couple minutes to work, school, which is also a warm environment, right? You know, you're not able to relatively, it won't be too bad, you know. A little bit different the much lower the temperature is, but, you know, let's say if it's just below freezing, yeah, most people can kind of tolerate that, right? It's totally different if you're outside for much longer periods of time. So, in an urban environment, right, maybe you're waiting for a ride, right? You're waiting for a ride, whatever, your transportation, whatever it is, you know, you can name it, bus, train, whatever, right? And you gotta wait, you know, and stuff like that. You gotta be, you know, waiting for it, you know, or as a kid waiting for the school bus or something like that, right? You know, you obviously time it, but sometimes things run late, there's a delay, right? Maybe there is a delay, and that can technically happen. You're waiting out there a little bit longer, right? So you want to be ready for that. just so you know you're not complaining, right? So you're not complaining. I mean, that's why I try to dress well. If I'm with other people, I don't want to complain that I'm cold or something like that. Nobody would be like, "Sir, why didn't you dress? Why didn't you layer up more?" you know, and stuff like that. And besides, I don't want them worrying or something like that. Let's see, where am I? Hi, Lee, I see you in there. Enfield Road, layout. Yeah. You felt comfortable. Tug was out there for over a half an hour. It is comfortable. Yeah. I mean, so it was offset. Yeah. So you didn't notice it at first, right? You did not quite notice it at first. And that deceiving part can kind of bite you in the back. The frostbite can literally bite you in the back. Bite you in the back. So yeah, and stuff like that. You just gotta keep that in mind, and stuff like that. And another reason why I decided to specifically talk about this a little bit more, because, and I'll mention this again because I mentioned it in a previous live stream. I've been well, actually, it'd be funny if they. Well, it'd be funny if they actually randomly joined. But if they did, then I'll mention it more. But some of these people out there that are without a permanent residence. All right, I'll say it like that. I do follow someone in that predicament right now, and I feel for them. I've mentioned hands under your hands. Hands cold. Put them under your armpit if possible, right? If possible, right? Share body heat whenever possible, right? And I feel for them at times, right? This is, yeah, they're doing the videos, live streams, or whatever, right? And they're kind of quote unquote damp, slight damp clothes, maybe in the 40s, in the single digits in Celsius, and they're pacing to warm up. Think about that. I mean, I've paced to warm up. Don't get me wrong. I remember this one time I had to do it, right? Because literally I had to keep moving, right? But this person they have to do it. And they realize they absolutely have to doing it because of their situation at the moment for them, right? And stuff like that. And imagine not having your typical winter gear, whatever you use, whatever you have, right? Or having extreme minimal cover, shelter, clothing elements, right? Like if I stepped outside and I accidentally got my sleeve wet, right? I can come back inside, change into a dry shirt, a dry sweater, a dry hoodie, right away, and let that wet, soaked, arm soaked hoodie that I wore because I was doing something or whatever, and the water spilled over me, and I still have to do outside. I can do that, but this person cannot do that. You're gonna keep that in mind, right? I mean, that's a more extreme case of something like this, but think about that when you're going outside. And when you're if you're into or looking for some new winter gear. I know one of my subscribers is looking for a new winter coat or whatever, that are trying to update it and stuff like that, right? When possible, if you got gear that you just simply, it doesn't fit you, style, whatever, especially the winter stuff, right? you know, try to donate. Hey, go give it to someone without a permanent resident. Maybe help them out, right? I'm pretty sure they could use that. You know, your own discretion, all that stuff. But keep that in mind. Something like that can, well, warm up their spirit within, right? Give them a little bit more to work with, right? And spread that warm feeling that you get wearing said jacket, gloves, mitts, whatever, right? And spread that love around whenever possible. I mean, I haven't done it for a little bit, but there was a couple of years back where, like, literally, I started to match a bunch of gloves and mitts together. And these were ones that I couldn't, I either did not want for whatever the reason is, or they were either too small, too big, whatever, right? And I matched them up. One of my friends helped me, and I gathered them up, and they took them over to a church. And hopefully those articles of clothing that I, grouped and paired up again, hopefully they helped some people out, at least temporarily, right? If they still got that gear or whatever, that'd be awesome, right? Especially if it's helping them out. It's all good, Lee. Yeah, exactly. Pacing does use a ton of energy calories too, right? Because you're physically moving. It's just like shivering, right? You can't, if you're shivering, you're pretty much moving, which also means that your body's trying to increase that energy or the heat output, right? For example. And like I said, this is especially kind of more serious in nature when there's slight breeze or any kind of wind. Either because, like I said, you're skiing, going downhill, or Mother Nature's actually there's Arctic windshield and like it's biting into you and going through you. And if you're like even remotely damp and you put water, you're gonna start to feel that. That water's going to start to pull the heat away from you as soon as it happens. It's just right. You're gonna feel that, and like I said, I feel for this person, alright, and that's why I'm there for them. I do what I can, but I mean, I know they're not the only person, honestly, and I feel for these people at times. I've seen them. I've known friends and stuff like that, and I feel for them, alright. Because it makes me appreciate being in a warm environment at times. Having a warm coffee like I am right now. Speak of which, cheers, everyone. Give me a 1 on the screen right here if you like coffee. Yes, I do. I'm remembering receiving a gift card from work, and it was $20 or whatever, right? Coffee place, yeah, or what Sunflower said earlier. But I help someone out randomly. I was just like, I'll pay it forward, right? So I got them a warm drink, well, coffee in that case, all right. Maybe, hopefully it helped them out. Hopefully they're still kicking it, right, and stuff like that. Maybe picked up their spirits a little bit more, right? I think this was during December too, so it was probably minus 20 Celsius out, minus 2 Fahrenheit. Because minus 17 Celsius is 0 Fahrenheit for you guys in the US. So I'll do this conversion for you folks, so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about and know what I'm talking about. So if you've been in that temperature range, yeah, you know how it feels for what it is, right? And you realize that, yeah, it is quite chilly at that temperature. You know, especially if you've been outside for longer periods of time. All right. And it's one, like I said, it's one thing to be outside for a short period of time, but it's totally different being outside for long periods of time. And unfortunately, for some people, it's much longer, like days, and stuff like clothing, shelter, cover elements, right? Those are your first line of defense. And honestly, having an active heat source, right? Remember, shelter components are a passive way to stay warm. You're retaining that heat within you a little bit longer. So it's not escaping into the environment, into the cold, from hot to cold, and transferring that heat away from you and causing you to feel chilly. Because as soon as you start feeling chilly, one of the automatic things that your body's going to do is shiver, and that also uses energy, like iron 5% uses up calories, right? So like I said, this is why I feel for this person, right? Because imagine being cold, wet, or damp, shivering, you haven't ate for a while, and you have to pace. Because you don't have a choice, right? So think about that, right? So when you later in next week, well, actually, for you guys in the U.S., Thanksgiving in the U.S. in a couple weeks. Well, actually, that's 2 weeks from now. Actually, I keep forgetting, it's Thursday, yeah. So 2 weeks from now, right? Think about that. Of course, next month, the holiday season, all that stuff, and January and February and all that stuff, right? Think about that. Consider that. And some people, unfortunately, have gone through that part of it. And then there's other people that have gone through this, more people that have gone through this because, unfortunately, these winter storms happen. Texas 2021, was that February, January, at that time. You're in a car, it's the middle of the winter, and there's a traffic jam, whatever. There's a story of that, and on the I-95 for you guys in the U.S. There's probably cases or similar things here in Canada, stuff like that. I remember this old video. I don't. It was actually, well, not here, but it was here in Canada. It was just like, but then it had to deal with ice, black ice. I mean, well, I guess I could probably dive into that, or slide into that. Yeah, slide into that. Yeah, I'll slide into that topic. That sounds better. Ah, you're having Ovaltine? Yeah, you felt that after eating a hot meal, because the meal is warming you up from the inside, giving you that caloric intake, and obviously you're inside again. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I feel it. Yeah, I get that. Iron Fire Horse. Yeah, it wasn't the same. It was not the same. I mean, I bet you that cold sandwich would help during the summer, and that's a little less. It probably still helps to a certain degree, but not as much as you think it would have, right? Instead of having something cold, you want something warm and stuff like that. Yeah, you'll quote unquote be able to make it with a cold sandwich, but a warm soup, it changes you from the inside, right? It gives you that warm, cozy feeling. Yeah, I'm gonna use the word cozy a lot because it's part of the title. Keywords, everyone. Right. And stuff like that. So, something like that is good to always keep in mind as much as possible. I mean, most most of the times I eat, if I'm eating soup, it's mostly during the fall, winter, early springtime. I tend to not eat soup so much in the summer, in the hotter parts of my life, but during the winter time, yeah, it's like I could go days and days having it at times where, and I vary it up, right? I vary it up with what I have. Now, that reminds me. I'll show you guys. Hold on. I gotta move some stuff. Hold on. Yeah, huge difference, yeah. Because my phone's more charged now. Maybe we'll lay something down here. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna find a spot. I'll show you guys. Like I said, I'll show you guys. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like I said, let's see. Let me turn on my camera here. You'll see only part of it because I have overlays on the screen right now, but see, look. Thermos. Alright, a thermos. A thermos is useful in the winter. Well, although a thermos is useful in a lot beyond the winter, but storing that hot water, storing that quote unquote thermal energy of water, a little bit longer could be useful too. Especially if you have one of the kind of more ideal, quote unquote, better ones, that are vacuum sealed, right? The chamber's vacuum sealed. Because obviously in a vacuum, there's no conduction, there's no convection. Just like in outer space, heat does not transfer in outer space easily, if at all, through conduction and convection, because there's lots of space in between all those particles out there. So the only way it transfers is through radiation then, right? And usually some of these better thermoses will have like a reflective wall that's on the outside, right? So you would get that outside shine. There's a vacuum sealed chamber on the inside, for example, and then something like glass or something like that to hold the hot liquid, for example, that can handle heat, for example. And like I said, some of those better ones don't have not a plastic top, screw top, or something like that. It'll be made of something more insulative, like cork, for example. And something, I remember my high school, one of my teachers from science class, that's actually one of the things that my teacher kind of taught us, and I remember that. And, they said, what I just said. And, the ones that have a cork, right, it's not hold back the heat because a lot better than plastic can, because plastic is probably going to be kind of neutral. But a cork has, air pockets in there and stuff like that. So it's going to hold back the heat or prevent the cold from, hold back the heat from escaping from the furnace that much longer. So instead of, one of the less effective ones, that 2 hour, if you haven't opened it 2 hours later, it's still hot-ish, right? To something that's a little bit better in that 2 hours, it's still as hot, just maybe a degree or two below what it was, right? So the heat loss from that isn't as great, especially, useful You want to put hot chocolate in or whatever, right? Hot water in so you can make tea, coffee, or whatever, right? Maybe you got it in the bag. Maybe you got it in your vehicle, right? Maybe you're that kind of person that likes to have that hot drink all the time, right? Maybe you're on the road, right? Maybe you're traveling or whatever, right? And you're far away from getting coffee from some convenience place or whatever, and you happen to have this, right? And it's stuff like that. And maybe you're frugal or whatever, so that's why you do it. I make coffee at home too, right? I do. Although sometimes I do have coffee on the road, but I tend to have coffee, quote unquote, at home. And I go, maybe I'll use this thermos, like I just showed, and go from there. Oh, you got one? Cool. Yeah, exactly. And just to relate this into a preparedness thing, it did help me once. I did actually lose power for a couple hours, right? And I was just like, oh, thank goodness I heated up some water, and my thermos still had hot water. So I could make coffee like that. I was ready. So it was just a minor inconvenience. I didn't have to be like, oh, I want a coffee. How am I going to heat up the coffee? I have options, don't get me wrong. Contingencies, all right? Yeah, contingencies, literally. But my alternative was a thermos. Especially if I'm proactive and actually fill it up. Because you actually have to do that, right? That's part of it, right? You can have a thermos, but you still have to fill it up with something hot. So to retain that energy in the water, so you can use it for like iron fire hose, cleaning, for example, or steam warm with, or whatever, tea, hot chocolate, and stuff like that, right? Maybe you're using it to heat up some ramen noodles or something like that, some instant noodles. Instant rice, oatmeal, stuff like that, could be very, very useful. Yeah, exactly, yeah. If you have multiples, then, you keep one reserve only for water only, right? Because honestly, stuff like hot chocolate, teas, coffee, yeah, it might stain it, amongst some other things that you might, aftertaste from the tea or coffee kind of deal, that you don't want in your water because you're making something else, or if someone doesn't like tea or coffee or can't handle it, right, you kind of don't want them, so you only have, specifically for water, right, you label it or whatever, right, and have another one that you use for hot chocolate, tea, or coffee, for example, if you're into that. I have a sip of coffee, speak of which. Yeah, that too. That too, iron for. Yeah, exactly, right. That's why, yeah, gotta be careful about that. And that's why if you have an event, it's only tea, only tea, only coffee, right? No, the additional stuff inside of it. That's all packed separately or added in afterwards, right? Any kind of dairy creamer, blah blah blah, coffee creamer, sugar, honey, maple syrup, any of that stuff. That's always added afterwards, right? For example. And there's one thing about the thermos that also allows you to, well, store that hot water or that thermal energy. So let's imagine here, because I did see some of the videos in 2021 when that happened in Texas, the the snow that happened and among some other things, right? People were outside. I get that. Over an open campfire barbecue or whatever, right? Making soup, probably. Heating up water, probably, for, like, coffee, yeah, right? And something warm again is gonna warm you up from the inside. You know, the food that you acquire is gonna give you the calories to keep that engine going on the inside, right? Keep up that metabolic heat that you're like leaking out because it's colder out. But the furnace allows you to store that hot water in something, and especially if it's relatively I shouldn't say higher quality, but a more efficient furnace. That might actually, especially if you don't open it or very seldomly open it or whatever, it's gonna keep it warm, probably even piping hot for hours and hours, right? For example, and you can always use that later within the time limit. I mean, you gotta test it out for yourself just to see. You put boiling water in, see how long it holds it for. 2 hours, 3, 4, 6, 8 hours. And then also in time it will cool down, right? Because there's always gonna be heat loss in the system, right? Just like I said, we're always radiating heat out. The furnace is still radiating heat out, except for these things like the vacuum chamber, the reflective wall on the outside, on the far outside that's away from the vacuum chamber of it, right? That seal. The cord that's holding that has air pockets in there. Yeah, it's gonna hold back the heat. However, there will still be some conduction loss to that cord. It'll be a lot less in comparison to like a plastic, or a less expensive or less effective one, but it will in time lose the heat. But we're talking about like hours and hours, for example. Maybe even like if you didn't open it, it might still be, maybe only 10, maybe only 20 degrees Celsius. So let's see. Maybe from like that 200 Fahrenheit to like, I don't know, 180, 160 Celsius, 60 Celsius. But that's in 8 hours. That's still quite warm enough or hot enough to still mix some instant coffee or tea, for example, right? Or using it for cleaning. Or if absolutely necessary, and there's a reason why I'm bringing this up, to use it to put in a hot water bottle or container that can hold that heat, for example. So let's say you're cooking, and let's imagine this, because this is actually what I would do if I was in that situation, everyone's having these, using their barbecue outside, these barbecue pits outside to keep warm, right? One of the things I would start doing in that situation, for example, is, because I've done this before, this one time, and I don't have the footage of it. However, there's a video that goes along with it, something I did back in the February of 2018, 17, 1 to 2. And pretty much you can store that more hot water and use it later on, like I said, as a hot water heater, for example, right? Now, obviously, once you start doing that, it's going to radiate heat out faster because it's outside of the furnace, but you're using it for that reason now, for quote-unquote, to keep warm with, for example. So keep that in mind. I mean, let's say you got that outside fire pit. You're doing this because, you don't have certain things or whatever, or it's your neighbor or whatever, right? And you're using up this fuel, wood, propane, whatever, right? At that time to keep warm with, Because you want to utilize that fuel, especially if it's an emergency situation. Like, if I happen in Texas, for example, but you can apply this probably in your vehicle to a certain degree too, especially for what you have. You want to use that fuel, that energy source, as efficiently as possible. get the most out of it, right? As much as possible. Because, you know, you really try to avoid, don't bring the barbecue inside a closed environment. Don't, stuff like that. Because carbon monoxide is a thing, for example, right? So if you only have that fire pit barbecue outside, that in this kind of hypothetical situation, but it could have been in the real, probably has happened, or people have done this in the real world too, is kind of, well, indirectly stay warm with the fire by transferring that energy, that thermal energy, into water, for example. I mean, maybe this is like one of those things where, you get something inside or whatever, right? But it's someone lit up a a fire pit outside or whatever, your neighbor or whatever, right? And you know them, you associated with them, and you're on the same page and all that stuff, right? And they're like, hey, see, are you want to warm up your hands? It's kind of cold. I just started this. I was gonna heat up some coffee here. It's cold outside. And stuff's happening around us. Some warm coffee. To think clearly and all that stuff. Warm back up, right? The morale boosting effects of like a hot brew, for example, right? I think in a situation like that, I'd be like, sure, oh yeah. Oh, warm up your hands, then start talking to them, and it's like, hey, can I bring over a container of water and heat it up? I'd be thinking like that right away, right? Using that, in this case, would be fire. Yeah, just like what it says on the screen, to keep warm with, right? Take care, Iron Fire Horse. To keep warm with. You want to indirectly use that as much as possible because, well, that's an energy source right there, right? That's giving you, well, thermal energy. You're just kind of temporarily storing it and indirectly using fire to keep warm with. Because it's just, to me, and I've done this before. I mean, it's just one of those things to keep in mind, right? Hence, in the bushcrafting community, they say, I'm in a water bottle for that reason, because you can do something like that, for example, right? And honestly, you don't want to burn yourself on the bottle or whatever, so, where you can handle it, right? Maybe not totally boiling water inside, but, much, much warmer than the outside environment, so it'll feel warm. Anything above your body temperature, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 Celsius, right? 40, 50, 60 Celsius, and so forth in Fahrenheit. It's going to feel warmer. And because the bottle, or the hot water in this case, is warmer than you are, it's going to transfer the heat, that energy, into you, and you're going to feel much warmer. For your hands, your extremities. Keep your core body temperature up as much as possible, because it'll help. Now, obviously, the modern day version is some sort of instant hand warmer, body warmer, right? That uses chemical reaction, basically iron, rust, to generate heat. A little bit of salt and stuff like that too. There's those reusable ones, whichever one you have. They have their pros and cons. One's more disposable. The other one kind of is paying to reverse the reaction for those ones. I've tried those before too. Sometimes you have issues with them and whatever, right? And of course, the disposable ones you gotta pay for, and they can wear down in time, quote unquote expire. Because it's a chemical reaction, right? The things deteriorate, or oxygen gets into it, or the rust prematurely happens and stuff like that. I mean, and I noticed that again, because, like I said, I've been following this one channel who is without a permanent residence, and they were trying out hand warmers, and they sent to me, because I can hear them. I was like, "Are you rubbing your hands?" And they're like, "No, no, no, it's the hand warmers. I'm trying to get them activated." Them, and they said, "I think these are like, quote unquote." They said expire because they said it was quote unquote warm but not hot to the touch, right? So it wasn't giving it its full potential energy of heat like it could have if it was still quote unquote fresh. So something to keep in mind. I'm gonna actually retry that again and see how that is. Like I said, I don't usually use hand warmers, but something I might try out just to see, because there's other things I've tried out before. Because remember, hand warmers use up the oxygen in the air. Well, to deliver the heat. All right, that's what it does. It's an exothermic reaction, as in releases heat. It releases heat. Versus, something on the opposite side of the spectrum, like an instant ice pack, which is endothermic, which is absorb heat, hence it gets cold. But these exothermic type of things, especially like hand warmer, it uses up oxygen, right? I did try this once. I have to try this again just to see for myself. But I didn't actually put it in a sealed container, like that had like gasket, right? Locking. I partially used hand warmer, and I brought it back out. I didn't open it for a long period for days, right? And because I was actually out at a friend's place, and I was trying this out just because I happened to have the container with me, and someone was using a hand warmer, and they didn't quite use it. Like, let's say it says up to 8 hours, right? They were using it for like maybe half an hour, right? So I'm like, well, let's try this out. Let's do the science on this and test this out. Is it in theory, or is there a grain of truth to it, right? Because I'm like, okay, it's an exothermic reaction. It uses up oxygen in the air to form, quote unquote, combustion or release heat. So if you remove the oxygen from that, wouldn't that mean the reaction stops? Just like fire needs fuel, heat, and oxygen to do that combustion, right? If you knock down one of the sides of the triangle, doesn't the reaction stop? Or at least greatly slow down, for example, right? So I tried it out. A couple of days later, I was like, I reactivated it once the air oxygen got back into the system, right? Now, granted, it wasn't as hot because remember, it was previously used for like 30 minutes. However, I think there was still a little bit in there. Brought me maybe another hour of warmth for what it was, right? I was just like, oh, that's interesting. So something to keep in mind. And don't just take my word for it. Do some tests yourself. See it for yourself, right? And tell me about it, right? Leave me a comment about it, because I wanna know for myself, all right? Because I just realized, I'm like, what happens if these hand warmers, you don't quite use them up, or something like that, or you just need something to cut the edge. So I'm thinking of trying this again. Maybe I'll show it as a video or whatever in some form or fashion, in such a way that it emphasizes or shows it for what it is, right? To avoid a random trickery or sleight of hand thing. I want to show it how it is, right, for what it is. So maybe I'll try that out and see how that goes for me. Because like I said, I actually do. I've seen them, and I know friends with them, right? And sometimes, like I said, I don't usually use hand warmers. So having, sometimes people give them to me and I don't quite use them in that season, for example, right? So I want to try this out because I know, just to see for myself, just to know for myself. I mean, like, I just take a look right here. I'm not even, I'll show you guys. I'm not even, I got some right here too. Hey, look. Let me move my coffee and put, alright. My overlays are to be in the way, but you'll get the idea. So, stuff like this. I'm talking about. Stuff like this, like I said, I'm talking about right here. Well, maybe not specifically. Well, maybe not specifically this one. Actually, the packaging is open. But some of these other ones, I want to see for myself because I know some, and try to understand this a little bit, right? So yeah, and try and see for myself. How far does it degrade down? How much in comparison? Because ever since I saw this live stream that someone, said that the hand warmer said they were expired and they weren't as warm, but, they still got a little bit of heat from it, so it was probably still relatively above body temperature, but it could have been only at 40, 50 Celsius, 104 Fahrenheit, 120 Fahrenheit. 50 Celsius, 120 Fahrenheit. So they got a little bit of heat, so I don't know. I want to try this out. But I want to do this later when it's a little bit cooler, colder out, just to see for myself in comparison. And stuff like this. Actually, I might do some more research on this. Because I actually did educate myself on how these work and, how this all happens, right? Stuff like that. It'd be nice to know. It'd be nice to know. So, I want to try these out. Actually, you know what? There should be no way. Wow. No, there's not. Now, I know there's other ways of doing it, right? Even without water. There's these, or instant hand warmers, or without, quote unquote, the reusable kind that uses phase change. That you can, quote unquote, reverse if you put it back and recharge it in hot water, although it takes a little bit. And sometimes they don't always work, or don't last as long in comparison. And, and stuff like that. There's pros and cons to both of them, or to all of them, right? Yeah, so. Well, I guess I know what I'm doing. I gotta dispose of that one nicely. And stuff like that, and get that out of the way. But I will try something else later. Maybe not, like I said, probably not today, but eventually I will. Where am I at? Okay. I'll probably go to the 90-minute mark. And it's something I want to try out. Just to see for myself. Because, and, how much time can you get out of it? Or how substantial is that difference? In comparison to quote unquote the expiry as it's written on the packaging, because I know they can not quote unquote expire, but they kind of become less and less effective. And I want to know how much, and by how much, how noticeable is it, and stuff like that. So I know. I know other people have talked about it, but I want to know for myself, right? Where I can kind of gauge it in comparison to other times, for example, and go from there. Because it would be nice to know. It would be nice to know, among some other things. You know, there is another thing I've been working on for this, too. I still have to try it out a little bit more, but I tried it out this one winter. It's a little bit different. Wow, it's actually, wow. Really, this is like an very old, probably very, very old school method. Because I've seen some more quote-unquote documentaries talking about staying warm before the 19th century, right? Before this more industrial, you know, kind of, before the modern day of electricity, right? And like, realizing, you know, understanding that and what they used in the past, right? To help them get by. So they, you know, they could be a little bit warmer for what it was, right? Before the modern age of hand warmers. Before the modern days of, you know, a furnace, for example. Before the modern days of having a heater in your vehicle, and amongst some other things. I was just like, because I've seen them before a little bit, you know. I was watching a few back in like September while I was kind of thinking about it. Is, you know, in September I kind of know it's gonna cool down, you know. And sometimes it gets colder at this time of year. Relatively speaking, right? Not as cold as December and January and February for me, but, you know, relatively speaking, it's freezing. Or it could be. Or part of the day or evening is below freezing, so I want to keep that in mind. So. But when I did try this, I only tried it very selectively. And I'm still working on some other things with it, but this is something I've been keeping in mind on what to do. Because if you've seen some of these videos out there, you will kind of understand it better. I mean, I'm not gonna really say, oh, I can't live with it. No, I'm just putting it in a way that I can use it, right? Something like they did in the past, but kind of with modern day information, knowledge, and materials, for example, right? But the concept of it would still be the same. To keep warm with. Warm and cozy with. And stuff like that. But I need to try it out, like I said. Let's just say I've tried out some other things too, and, you know, some of them can be more dicey. Definitely not ideal. You gotta be more careful. Yeah. Yeah. And let's remember, everyone, like anything, any open flame, anything that's combustion, you gotta watch out for CO2, carbon monoxide, CO indoors in a more contained environment with no ventilation and stuff like that, you know. I mean, a tent is probably not gonna be that sealed up, right? You're gonna have some ventilation, but I'm talking about inside, like at home, right? You know, you probably want to crack a window, have your seal detector nearby, relatively speaking, right? Don't leave it unattended. Don't leave the candles unattended, or whatever, right? And stuff like that. And another reason is, you know, you want to be comfortable, right? So if you're relying on something like a fuel source, combustible, consumable fuel source, whatever it is, let's say propane, whatever, right? You want to make sure you have enough of it. And for what you do have, you want to be able to utilize it make it stretch as long as possible. And it's very important considering that if you're in a vehicle in that type of situation, they say, because I remember, again, my science teacher. Boy, how much I enjoyed that science teacher. They taught me so much. I guess this is why I mentioned these stories specifically. He was a great science teacher. So I learned so much from him. He even mentioned about being in a vehicle or whatever, starting the engine, right? Especially if you have limited amount of fuel, for example, right? Obviously, the best case scenario is not to be in it or, to have a full fuel tank. Hence, in the preparedness community, they say, keep your tank above half, 3/4, whatever, right? Or as full as possible, right? Just in case something like that happens. Because sometimes when you're out on the road, on the highway, it could happen. Maybe even not even your own fault, right? Maybe your engine and all that stuff's still running. You just can't move forward because something's blocking the path. Delay of some sort. Hey, Verna, how are you doing? I see you in there. All right. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. So, about that engine, right? My science teacher said, and I remember, he's like, yeah, just turn it over, like, every 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. It depends how cold it is, and it depends how cold you are, right? But basically, in a nutshell, you do it just to cut the edge of the cold, right? And try to make that quote-unquote fuel gas you have last as long as possible for the scenario, the situation, right? Especially in certain situations where you have no idea how long it's going to go for, or how long you don't have to rely on it, right? I mean, even this channel I visit, like I said, they are not in a permanent residence. They don't have a permanent residence. They even said, yeah, they keep it on pretty much on low all the time. And just kind of every so often just to cut the edge, right? To make it last as long as possible, especially, throughout the night, for example, right? It's all good, Faye. It's all good. I appreciate you dropping by. Because I guess I'll go a little bit longer. I'll go a little bit longer. Not that much longer, but I will go a little bit longer. Why not? Since I do have an audience here. It's because I'm waiting for a call, so I gotta make sure at a certain time. So I gotta make sure I'm ready for it. But I can go on for a little bit longer. Yeah, I'll go for a little bit longer. We'll see, depending. And like I said, my science teacher said that to us in the class, right? It was part of the lesson. We were learning. I'm pretty sure we were learning about fire, but I think we were learning about how. About chemical reactions and stuff like that, and phase change and stuff like that. I know I'm getting more sciencey, but heat and stuff like that. Fire is a chemical reaction, and we were learning about that and stuff like that. I always remember that class of all the things I remember at times. I don't remember some of the other classes at times, but I'm like, I definitely remember that class because it was very educational and real world knowing of something, right? Like when my teacher mentioned that, it's just like, none of us drove. None of us, we've been in vehicles or whatever, right? Driven to school or whatever, been on school bus, whatever, something like that. But none of us drove, right? We didn't understand that well. But as some of us got older, started driving all this stuff as adults, we were always, oh yeah, this is important to remember. Especially for some of us that eventually drove on a highway or went on a road trip on a highway or took a trip in like December when it's like minus 20, 30 out because we're visiting someone that's 8 hours away on the highway. Very important to remember that just in case. I'm realizing, to keep that in mind that yes, the vehicles don't warm you back. Well, the heat or in the vehicles don't warm you back up, but it's consuming fuel, and you only have a finite amount of fuel, so you're gonna use that as efficiently as possible. For example, I like how you wrote "cool" there. Kewl. It almost seems like I just. Nah, anyways. But yeah, it's just something I remember because I always keep that in mind. Because I'm like, oh yeah, they were right about that. The life lessons I learned from school, amongst some other things, at that time. I'll always remember them, right? And this is why I spread that part of that knowledge. Because, I appreciated it a little bit more that I'm an adult from that, but I did appreciate my science teacher mentioning that, right? I hope science class, and I don't know what the kids are learning nowadays, whatever, right? I don't think it's cutbacks or whatever, but I hope they still indirectly bring that up, right? If they're talking, if a science teacher's talking about like phase change, chemical reactions, right? Fire is a chemical reaction, right? Amongst these other things, right? Or talking about how things heat transfers from hot to cold, right? From hot to cold, right? That's how it goes. Energy flows that way, one direction. Maybe bringing up this other real world stuff to kind of solidify. Yeah, I use that word solidify. I didn't even mean it like that. It just came up, but to solidify what they're talking about. And stuff like that. Because it does make sense. It does make sense, heat loss, like I said, about the heat loss, So if you're certain situations, you try to insulate yourself from the cold ground, for example. Like in the bushcrafting community, people that can't do outdoor activities like that, quote unquote, people showing survival related things, they say, yeah, get off the cold ground, for example. Insulate yourself from the cold ground. Ideas like leaves, for example, boughs from trees and stuff like that. You do as much as you can, make it as thick as you can, right? Because as soon as you stamp or lay on it, it's going to compress, right? And it's going to lose its loftiness. So hence you try to make it as thick as possible so that 3 foot becomes a foot or whatever once you lay in it and rest in it. Especially important if you're trying to get a good night's rest. Or, maybe it's a more important situation or whatever. Or maybe you're just out camping, all right? I mean, I've shown this. I did actually show it. I did show it in my last camp out video. Even though it was hotter out, it was still cool at night for what it was. Because there was a major temperature difference, right? Right? So, I was like, kind of glad I did that, right? Now, I did use grass, or shredded, quote-unquote, shredded grass for it, but I just kept adding it in. Because it also doubled as, not only as insulation, but something more, it made it more comfortable. It made the spot a little bit more cozy. Usually those experiments are done when it's extremely cold out and they throw it in the air to expand the surface area. That's usually how it works so effectively like that. I know how that works. Is when, yeah, exactly. I said this earlier about being dry versus being damp or wet. Right? Or will pull heat away from you much, much quicker. Just like metals can pull heat away from you much, much quicker. Hence, in the schoolyard, when someone asks, hey, I dare you to lick that pole. Don't be, don't do that. Especially it's school freezing. Because you'll be the one looking like a fool. When you're, yeah. Don't do that. Definitely don't do that. Especially the colder it is. It's one thing to do it when it's like 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit. But don't be doing that when it's well below freezing, because that's probably gonna be painful. I mean, I've never tried it, and I will never want to do it. 'Cause I could just imagine that. That'd be like, ugh. I just don't want it to cool tongue. Right? Yeah. Yeah, it was very cushiony, yeah. And stuff like that. Because I was trying it out. I was just like, yeah, it was nice. It was nice. It just happened to double for me that first night that I camped out. That first night out. Because actually, that first night, because I was with someone else, right? Even they said, hey, see, are you kind of cold? It was kind of different, right? I'm like, thank goodness I added in something at the bottom of my tent. It's kind of got me off the ground even a little bit more. So there's greater R value. I guess I'll say R value. That's what they use, right? I was just like insulated value to it. I was just like, no. I kind of did that, right? I had to put something on top too, right? So I was sleeping on something, in something, and something over top of me, right? Insulation at the bottom, something like a sleeping bag, in something, and then the environment of a tent, for example, right? I could have added in something else. I actually did that first night. I didn't do it the rest of the nights because the rest of the nights were warmer in comparison to our first night. I was just like, oh, I'm kind of glad I brought this extra little stuff, and helped kind of made it a little bit less inconvenient, a little bit more comfortable for what it was, right? I'm just like, yeah. And like I said, my friend said the exact same thing, right? It wasn't just me, right? It wasn't just, oh, I'm just a little cold. My friends kind of like, are you gonna go, Because, like, literally, we're in separate tents, like, next to each other, and I can hear them, right? And just, like, literally, not even an hour later, we're waking back up, and I was just like, I wake back up, and I can hear my friend, I'm like, you're still up? Yeah, it's kind of chilly. See her, I'm like, yeah, I don't, I didn't think it would be, right, at that time. Because where I was camping at that time, it's not like that desert environment where it's really hot during the day and then super cold at night. And I was just like, but I think it's because I was so close to a major water source, like a lake. There was lakeside effects of coolness in that night in comparison. And I'm talking about where the daytime temperature was over 90 Fahrenheit too, right? I was just like, so I'm like, oh, I'm thinking this, yeah, I remember that. I'm definitely remembering that now. I gotta remember those lakeside effects of, especially from a large body of water, how I can either offer cooling or heating, for what it is, I was just like, yeah, that must be the cooling effect, the lakeside effect of being over here. But yeah, something I kept in mind. Yeah, exactly. Layers are a big, important factor. Yeah, bedding and all this. No, I see. I've been hearing about that. I've only received very, very little. Very, very little. I can't even show you it because technically it's above freezing right now. So it's melted away already. But yeah, I've already had the white stuff here already. That's why it's part of the thumbnail. And that's why I partially showed it in one of my other live streams at the end. That you might see. But yeah, I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, these are really important things, layering and all that stuff, right? Especially if you're new to a place. Let's say you came from a warm, quote unquote, warmer environment to a colder environment, relatively speaking, right? I know, this is your first time in Canada. This is your first year in Canada, or first winter, or whatever, exchange student, whatever, kind of thing, right? This reminds me of a story. I've mentioned this story before on the channel several times. Usually for a very specific event that I can help out, but I'll mention it again in here because it is relatable, could happen, and if you got a story similar to that, let me know, right? But when I was young, you know, just I was just a little CR, just a little guy, right? In school we were, it was recess time, that kind of time. It was probably about. I'm trying to remember the temperature. It's been a long time, but it was definitely well below 0 Fahrenheit, well below minus 17 Celsius. Now I don't think it was quite minus 30 Celsius, minus 22 Fahrenheit, but let's say in between those values. And when I was attending school, personal thing, and we had lots of different students, both genders, different ethnic backgrounds and stuff like that, and this person was new in the school, right? Probably within the last, because I'm trying to remember what time of year that was. Well, yeah, I know there's snow outside. It was cold. Let's say December, right? I think they showed up around October, early October, mid October, something like that. Not quite in the beginning of the school season, but relatively speaking, right? Their family just kind of moved into Canada, first winter here in Canada. And I don't think that person was as prepared as for what to expect, because they didn't have quote unquote the ideal or proper clothing for the temperature, right? Dressed for the weather, right? They weren't as dressed for the weather as some of my other classmates, including myself, right? Many of us, we knew, our parents probably told us if they didn't tell us already, like, don't forget your mitts, don't forget your gloves, you don't want to cold hats, don't forget your hat, do you have your hat? Yes. Are you wearing 2 pairs of pants or ski pants? Yes. And stuff like that, right? But this person had less in terms of clothing, shelter, cover elements, right? Not used to it too, so they were never acclimatized to it, right? The rest of the students, it's not our first quote unquote rodeo, first winter, right? So we know what to expect, right? This person, it must have been almost, I don't know exactly where they came from. I'm trying to remember and what they experienced before, but after recess time, they came back inside and they were very distraught, very upset, for lack of a better word, right? And this is during the time where, like I said, I know for sure it was above minus 30 Celsius or minus 22 Fahrenheit, because actually, if it was that cold, we wouldn't even have recess. So it was like probably minus 2 Fahrenheit, minus 20 Celsius, right? So we still had to go out for recess, right? But they came back inside and very they had frostbite, or they weren't used to it, or extreme case of frostbite, but probably frostbite. Right, very minimal clothing, shelter, cover elements with them, right? And I remember this because, our teacher tried to do what they could, right? Stuff like that, right, for what it was and stuff like that. I remember this one other student. They offered their spare gloves because they had spare gloves. Right? I guess that 2 is 1, 1 is none thing will come into play. I was just like, and stuff like that. But they offered their spare gloves, at least, cut the edge off, right? Obviously, their hands are probably still going to be cold, right? But in the meantime, until they could get a pair or whatever, right? Maybe their parents didn't have the funds at the moment or whatever, right? And and it reminds me of that story now, because I talked about, like I said, about someone that's not in a permanent residence. It's there's very similar things, right? The result is still the same. Cold, shivering, frostbite, whatever, right? And it sucks. It really does. And it's just, it reminds me of this now, more and more, you know, because I can still picture it in my head. You know, very few things at times I remember at school. I'm like, yeah, I remember that part. I don't remember the names or whatever, right? Exactly when it was, how old it was, but I just know that it happened, alright? And stuff like that. So, keep that in mind, alright? Keep that in mind. Like I said, keep that in mind. You want to be ready for it, alright? Because, like I said, it kind of sucks getting frostbite. That really, well, literally frostbite bites. It'll bite you, and it'll bite hard, Because some of the most painful things at times, and I think this is what the person experienced, is that falling of it from getting frostbite, right? Because there's a certain point where it'll be numb to, like, and you'll feel it, but then you don't feel it until it falls back out because you come back into a warm environment, like how we did from coming from outside in recess at that, for this example here that I'm talking about, a real world example that happened a long time ago for me, that I saw someone else experience, and that from a cold environment to a warm and back environment again, right? And the thing is, that was probably only 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Now, granted, they're probably not used to it, and among some other things, and didn't have the proper shelter or clothing elements, but that was just 15 minutes, right? Just imagine if that was much longer than 15 minutes, right? Hence, I feel for some of these people that are without a permanent residence, especially someone that I've been able to talk to on their panel. They know where I stand on that, and that's why I'm there for them. I do what I can, but, Yeah, exactly, right? That's actually what happened. You come into a warm area and it burns like crazy. Yeah, because it's falling out, right? It's falling out. And you feel that as that kind of biting sensation, and it hurts. That I know. I've experienced frostbite before. Mild frostbite, never severe frostbite, thank goodness. And I've seen other people go through it too, right? And I know it happens. It's that same feeling. It's from coming from such a cold environment and kind of randomly coming into a really warm environment suddenly, right? Because you're finally at your destination or whatever, right? And, remembering the story I just said reminds me how quick that can happen, especially the colder it is, right? Because the colder it is, it accelerates the process of it, right? There's a big difference between 5 minutes in 0 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius for 5 minutes, 20 Fahrenheit, minus 9 Celsius, minus 17 Celsius, 0 Fahrenheit, minus 22 Fahrenheit, minus 30 Celsius for that same amount of time. Difference. There is a difference. Start feeling cold much faster because the outside temperature is much greater than your body temperature, for example. So the heat loss is greater for what it is. The only difference is we put on clothing, base layer, insulated layer, some sort of outer shell or something like that has rain, waterproof, windproof, whatever-ness. And of course has gloves and mitts, whatever, toques, bubs, whatever, right? And I've worn all that stuff, right? Scarves, whatever, right? Hats, foot gear, ski pants, 2 pair of pants, whatever, especially the colder it is, right? And you realize that, 5 minutes in 0 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius, 32 Fahrenheit, it's much different in minus 30. However, some people still kind of take that for granted because they're going, like I said earlier, they're going from home walking across the driveway to their warm, preheated vehicle. They're driving for that 10, 15 minutes to school, work, whatever. Walking through a parking lot for 5 minutes again, and back into a warm environment, right? You're not gonna get that. You're not gonna notice that as much, right? In terms of, okay, Verna, and kind of warm to back to from cold to warm environment. You're not gonna notice that as much in comparison. Well, I think I will go into like the 2 hour mark because it's past the top of the hour already. So, unless otherwise, unless otherwise, but I'm not gonna be a hypocrite here and be like say all this stuff. I'm gonna do my own kind of preparedness type of thing in terms of winter, anyways, for what it is. Maybe I'll get. I haven't brought out the snow boots yet, but I think I'll start off with the first pair. First pair. I'll just have them kind of ready by my shoes, just in case I want to dip in and use them or whatever, right? That way it's already ready to go, ready to rock and roll, ready to deploy and all that stuff. I mean, I've already started wearing gloves, by the way, outside, just because I've actually had to do stuff outside and stuff like that. I'm like I said, I've already had to do this other stuff, so I actually had to do it. And some of these days at times, even the other day, it was sunny out. Technically, it was above freezing, the temperature, but slight wind. But it just didn't feel like above freezing. It still felt like it was above freezing, right? I was just like, and I could see it in other people. And I see other people, I was just like, and they were just a little bit warmer in comparison, right? So it didn't feel that warm out, even though it was sunny and above freezing. It was that kind of cooler kind of day for what it was. And I think I know exactly why, because it makes sense. Let's just say I think the heat got sucked away from the environment by all this moisture in the ground. I think that's ultimately what happened. And that's why it didn't feel like it was warming up that quickly. Like it felt cold, pretty chilly in the shade. And it had better in the sun. And stuff like that. And going from there, I was just like, yeah. I was wearing, because I had to do stuff outside for a bit. And I was just like, oh yeah, I think I'll wear these. I don't think I'll wear these articles of clothing and stuff like that. Be like, yeah, I feel a lot better to get dexterity back in my hands. Because I had to do stuff. I was touching metal and holding things in my hands and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I need to what are some shelter elements? I didn't need to tip into like active heat sources like hand warmers or anything like that. But if you're gonna dip into that, that's why you would have them in the first place, right? To have those hand warmers on standby or something along the lines of that. Because passive heating, like clothing, as long as it's, especially if it's dry, will continuously work for you, right? Providing that you have chemical caloric intake in you to generate that body heat and stuff like that. Now, it's gonna take much longer to dry out if it's damp or wet. You don't have to move around or whatever. And probably stay in the sun to dry out or whatever. In comparison to active heat sources, fire, sunlight, some sort of hand warmers or body warmers or anything that's exothermic in reaction, right? And that delivers heat out, right? Those are the active sources that may be able to dry you out and provide you much warm. It will provide the heat. You don't feel it. You don't warm up much faster in comparison to just having a passive heat source such as clothing. Now, if you have both, it's just gonna work that much better. So you're putting you have an external heat source, and you have these passive shelter components that hold back the heat that is generated, not from your body, in this case, but from an external source. So let's say from hand warmers or something like that. They're underneath your jacket, that insulated, wind-resistant, windproof jacket, for example. Maybe you're wearing darker clothing in the sun while you're skiing, for example, right? These are shelter components to keep you kind of warmer. They're very important to remember, because both of them work very, very well together. Very, very well together. Because I've seen videos out there where people actually try to, can you stay warm with only body warmers? And they said, yes, you are warm with it. But it's also those hand warmers, how many hundreds that you have on your body, right? You can't adjust the temperature, and it's always, those heat packs are always radiating out, right? And they needed that many to quote unquote stay warm with, right? Because I think it was like 32.0 Celsius when they did this, right? One of the big beat channels, I remember this for some reason, and they said, the host was saying, like, I probably could get by with a little bit less and put on something like a jacket. So the passive and the active are combined together, and you can act, if your shelter components are really, really good, you might be able to get by with a little bit less active heat sources, for example. That's the main thing I'm trying to kind of say in there. I was just like, yeah, that makes sense. If I was wearing a mitt with a hand warmer, it's not, my hands are gonna feel really warm, and it's gonna be able to hold back that heat, and maybe make that hand warmer last just that much longer, for what it is, right? There's a certain point where the hand warmer starts to fall below your your body temperature, and it'll start to feel cold because, well, I shouldn't say cold, but cooler, because it's physically less warm than you are. So remember, like I said, heat goes from hot to a cooler or colder environment. So it's probably going to start pulling heat away from you into that hand warmer, because it's falling below 37 Celsius, 98.6 Fahrenheit. Now, once it gets to that ambient temperature, well, it's pretty much spent. It's pretty much spent. There's not even any point really to have it on anymore, because, stuff like that. Because it's going to start pulling heat away from you, because it's not warm. It's no longer warmer than you are, your body temperature, and it's definitely as cool or cold out as the ambient temperature. Yeah, you don't feel that. Especially with these hand warmers, alright? Because they generally have iron in, and iron will give you that rust, that exothermic reaction, but iron pulls energy away. It does. Iron does pull energy away. It can hold heat for a little bit of time, just like your cast iron. You can heat it up to a certain temperature, and it'll stay hot for a little bit longer in comparison to, say, steel or something like that. However, you gotta warm it up first. Because it's in that same way that it can hold the heat. You gotta wait for it to warm up, so it's pulling heat from the element fire for a little bit of time until it gets warm enough and stuff like that. So this will be my standard 2-minute warning for my live stream here, and I appreciate everyone that dropped by on this live stream. Impromptu, heard me out. Hopefully keep these things in mind. Try to help others if you can. Do what you can, right? Not everyone is, don't be, not everyone's this or that, I get it, be careful, right? Do what you can, right? I get it, only you can choose who you want to help. You want to help? Go ahead. Alright? I've done it before too. I've helped people out randomly in the winter. Because I feel. Maybe it's a Canadian thing. I don't know. Like maybe it's a Canadian thing that we just do. But I just helping people out, right? Especially considering it's welcome when I'm in their shoes and I need the help or something happened or whatever, right? People just something like that, and it's always appreciated, right? You get that warm feeling inside. Maybe I'll just end this stream with some sing along, right? And go from there. Let me just move that here. So everyone, hold on. Let me actually bring this up properly. Let me gotta have my chat for a moment here. Yes, see. Stay warm, everyone. See? You guys probably didn't even notice that. Stay warm, everyone. Because I do this in a certain way. Be prepared out there, right? Stay warm out there. Be careful what you use. Remember, those shelter components are just as important as that. Those active heating sources, right? They both of them work hand in hand. It's trying to stay as dry as possible, right? Moisture, water, sweat, some pull heat away from you. For example, dress for the weather, as they say. And, stay proactive out there. And like always, everyone, as I bring this up. Look, let me bring this up here so you guys can see it here. Let me remove this out of the way. Like always, and yes, I will say it this time. Because I feel like I want to. Make sure it's not on repeat. Things are happening out there, and we need to adapt too. Skill and knowledge get better with practice. Go help someone if you can. And, like always, everyone, I'll catch you next time on the next live stream, video, post. See you in some side chat. See you in some community board or phone call and all that stuff. Take care. Stay warm out there. Be proactive. Be ready. And I'll catch you all next time. And with that, I'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone.